Now, before I get started, I do want to warn you that there will be spoilers for The Last Jedi in this video, so if you haven't seen it yet, I'd highly recommend clicking away and coming back at a later time. Also, I'd like to wish everyone a happy holidays, and a happy Life Day in particular. And if you've seen the Star Wars Holiday Special, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, and with that out of the way, let me start by saying that it's not my intent here to bash either J.J. Abrams' The Force Awakens or Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi. I don't hate either movie, though I certainly have my issues with both of them, and I've gone over those in other videos. What I am here to ask is, if these two directors did not see eye to eye and did not have a shared vision for this trilogy, and if that is the case, should there have been a grand plan all along? And before you run to the comments to tell me that Lucasfilm has already stated that there was no grand plan, and that these writers and directors are being given free reign over their particular episodes, but that both Abrams and Johnson have said that they worked well together and whatnot, well, I'd ask, what else would they say? If J.J. Abrams hated the direction of The Last Jedi, would he say as much? And would he have been asked back to do Episode 9 if he had? In both cases, obviously not, because usually actors and directors take a very measured and political approach when they answer such questions. They say exactly what they're supposed to say to support their movie and the company that paid them a lot of money to make it. But for me, perhaps the biggest problem with this trilogy on the whole right now is an obvious lack of a shared vision and a disjointed feeling between the first two movies. And I know some of you will immediately say that there was also no shared vision between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, that they too feel like two distinctly and vastly different movies, and that they have completely different tones. And you'd of course be right. But the biggest differences are, A New Hope didn't end on any sort of cliffhanger, nor did it pick up immediately where the previous film left off, and have to feel like a continuation of the exact same story or movie. And when Empire Strikes Back ended on a giant cliffhanger, the first third of the next movie, Return of the Jedi, was spent on resolving that cliffhanger. And I'm not saying Episode 8 should have felt entirely like a follow-up to 7, that all it should have done was answer questions. I get it needed to tell its own story. I also get that JJ injected a lot of mystery into 7 for Rian Johnson to follow up with in Episode 8, and that was no easy task. But I do question Lucasfilm's decision to bring in different directors for each of these movies and to have no sort of grand vision, to not sit down and figure out where this story is going before they set it in motion. Because honestly, the more times I see The Last Jedi, and the more I think about it, the more I think what really throws me off is how it seems like Rian Johnson really didn't try too hard at all to continue what J.J. Abrams started. And maybe you hate J.J. Abrams and or The Force Awakens, and you're happy about that. That's fine if that's your stance. Me, however, I may have had my issues with The Force Awakens, but I really wanted to see where that story was going, and I'm not sure The Last Jedi did that. Again, maybe you felt it did, and that's fine. But the way the last movie ended, in my opinion, does not seem to line up with how this one started. And I'm talking about the continuation of Rey handing the lightsaber to Luke, which technically is not where this movie starts, but of course is where the last one ended. Because imagine you're watching that scene in its entirety. Imagine you're watching the end of The Force Awakens, and we've just spent the whole movie looking for Luke Skywalker, and now Rey's found him, and she's handing to him the lightsaber that called out to her, the one that led her here. And then he lowers his hood in a grand gesture, sees the lightsaber, and has what appears to be a million different emotions run across his face. And after all of that, after we've been looking for Luke Skywalker this whole movie, he then slowly takes the saber and promptly tosses it over his shoulder and walks away. However, that's not even what really bugs me about the scene, even though one could almost say this is representative of Rian Johnson taking what J.J. Abrams did with The Force Awakens and just tossing it away. Instead, what really shows that these two directors were not on the same page with where this story would go is the fact that Luke is wearing his Jedi robes in this scene. In fact, he's in full Jedi regalia, if you will. So the question for me then is, why? If Luke had stopped being a Jedi, why'd he dress up like one on that day, and then immediately go change his clothes after Rey showed up? And sure, he was going fishing and milking right after, and he wanted something a little more casual for that, I'm sure. But why'd he start his day in his Jedi robes? We know he disconnected himself from the Force and hadn't felt the death of Han or the destruction of the New Republic. So if it wasn't to mourn either of those, why was he wearing them? Does he just like to do it every so often to reminisce? Or was this the day he decided, coincidentally enough, to go burn down that tree already? Because the next time he wears them was in the scene where he went to burn the tree down. And you might say that I'm nitpicking right now, and you'd be right. But what that last scene tells me is that when J.J. Abrams wrote and filmed it, he personally wasn't trying to hint to us that Luke had lost his way. He was trying to tell us that Luke was there for another reason, but that he was still going to be, for the most part, the Jedi that we had known. And I dare say if Luke had been dressed like a hermit and looked like a haggard old man at the end of The Force Awakens, I would have been more accepting of the way he was in The Last Jedi. Instead, I feel like it left us expecting something else. And that was part of the reason why I was so disappointed. And yes, I've spoken my piece about the way Luke was handled in my last video, and I'm not trying to get into it again here. And no, I didn't respond to many comments to that last video, mostly because I felt like I had said it all right in the video. Also, I do very much respect your opinions, and I didn't want to sit here and argue with you about this. If you like the way Luke was handled in episode 8, that's completely fine by me. The point of the video was to say how I personally felt after waiting to see Luke in action again on the big screen after 35 years. Not to try and tell you how you should have felt about it. Just because I put up videos on YouTube doesn't make my opinions or my arguments any more or less valid than yours. And I'm certainly not here to tell you how you should feel about or how you should love Star Wars. That is completely up to you to decide. Anyway, completely setting aside my feelings about how Luke was handled, I really just wish there had been some sort of plan for this trilogy, because it really feels like the story J.J. Abrams started didn't continue in The Last Jedi. And now with J.J. doing episode 9, well, I feel like episode 8 really could become the odd movie out, because J.J.'s movies are going to be bookending it. Not to mention, it left us with no real sort of cliffhanger or directive for J.J. to now have to carry out. Yes, it killed Luke and turned Kylo Ren into the Supreme Leader, but it left us with zero indication of where the next part could go, which you could see as a good or bad thing, I suppose. But what it really did was left the door wide open for J.J. Abrams to do pretty much anything he wants. And if he comes in and has it where Snoke is still alive and Rey's parents were actually very important, which, mind you, I don't think he's going to do, then episode 8 really will be rendered completely irrelevant, and love it or hate it, that would be a true shame. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. And now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Was there or wasn't there any sort of shared vision in place? Did Rian Johnson do justice to the story JJ started? Or were you maybe happy that he essentially ignored it? Let me know in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.